Hello, this is Matt Ballant, author of The Valley of the Pharaohs. This is episode 6 of my ongoing series of videos detailing how to play and giving insight into the game. Today we're going to discuss the secondary attributes, and with no further ado, secondary attributes are generally derived from the primary attributes, or they're somewhat race-based. And they consist of speed, cha or health, carrying capacity, heka, which are magic points, mat, which is an alignment system, kismet, and renown. Speed is basically how fast the character can run, and it's race-based. As you can see on the chart, each of the circle has a base speed number. And you could think of this as a number based on a 3d6 scale, 3 to 18 being a normal distribution. And instead of rolling, these are the general speed numbers that are assigned to each race. It's very similar to the very original D&D, where there was no speed at all for characters. And this is my way of allotting speed to character races. But since it's really only used in combat, it's not its own separate rollable stat. There are some attributes that can affect it, like strength and quickness, but in general, it's primarily affected by the height and the weight of the character, which we talked about in the previous session. Cha, or health, is a measure of the overall health of the character, how much physical punishment they can take, their overall feeling of well-being, and it's equal to twice a character's strength. And that's a set number. It's set for the duration of the character. And this would be twice their strength at the time the character was created. So if something happens where their strength is increased magically or decreased, something of that nature, that wouldn't affect this initial value. It wouldn't change. Now, there are magic items or spells, certain situations where characters might be granted additional hit points. Say they have an amulet of protection that grants them, something like 1d6 additional hit points. Any magical or supernatural type hit points, they would be the first ones expended by the character. So if you normally have 20 hit points and you got a +3, so now you have 23, the first 3 hit points would go against those magical numbers. For situations where a character might, quote unquote, die, in general, if you go to 0 or below on your hit points, the character becomes unconscious. But they are able to survive for a number of hours equal to their strength score. Now, if their hit points are below the number of hit points they have, so for example, if they had 20 hit points, if they went to -20, for some reason they took an enormous amount of damage or something, they would be automatically killed. They would be dead. Now, if they go below 0, but not quite to their hit point maximum below 0, so following that example, if they, say, went 10 below 0, they would still be alive and capable of being revived, so long as through curing or magical means, their hit points could initially be brought up above zero. They would have an opportunity to come out of this unconscious coma state and possibly survive. And that's done, a check can be made every hour up to a maximum of 48 hours. And in the book, there's a chart based on the conditions that they're being treated, and they must make a successful roll 2 out of 3 times. So you would roll a maximum of 3 times an hour to see if they could come out of their coma. Now, once they're conscious, they can regain 1d6 points after the first hour of rest, and then an additional 1d6 after a second hour. And beyond that, the normal non-magical recovery period would be 1 point per day after initial 5-day period. So that's how the hit points work in the game. Characters' carrying capacity is essentially the amount of weight they can carry around, lift and carry around. And generally, this is 4 times their strength in kilos. If they're a Sam character, one of the cattle-based characters, it's 6 times their strength. And this would be affected by changes in strength. So if for some reason the strength score of a character was reduced temporarily somehow due to illness or a magic spell or something, their carrying capacity would go down in that case. Carrying additional burden does have an effect on the speed of the character. And again, this is really only applicable in a melee or combat situation. In generally adventuring, if you're not involved in combat, you really don't need to pay much attention to this. The maximum lift, which is related to carrying capacity. Now, this is just the physical amount of weight that the character can lift, like a deadlift situation, not necessarily carry around, just lifting off the ground. The character at 6 times their strength and 8 times if they're a Sam character. Heka, or magic points. This is normally used in the casting of magic spells, or what's called active magic. The initial score is equal to their intelligence plus their power. And similar to hit points, this generally does not increase. It's set for the duration of the character. Similar to carrying capacity, however, if the attributes are changed, the Heka value changes. So if something happens and the character's intelligence is reduced, their magic point score would also be reduced. Now, these points are generally regained in their entirety every morning at dawn. As Ra rises above the horizon, Heka is restored, assuming the character has had at least a certain amount of sleep, at least 4 hours or so of sleep during the night. They regain their magic points. And it's something to note that all characters have Heka, regardless of their ability to cast spells. There are situations where Heka can be transferred from character to character or used as sort of a reservoir, if you will. The party can use, magic using characters in a party can use Heka from non-magical characters in the party in certain situations. Next, we have Mot, or alignment. The alignment system in Valley of the Pharaohs is just based on a spectrum from 1 to 100, with 1 being a very chaotic oriented character and 100 being an almost unattainable order-based character. And it's really just a gauge of the principles of the character. There's no set restrictions on characters' play or what they can and cannot do based on their alignment. It's only just a gauge to allow players to have some idea of how they might approach situations or how they might want to have their characters behave. Now, the starting value of this is basically the sum of the character's lowest 4 prime attributes. And this would be before any bonus that you might receive based on your cast. And the way this is kept track of during the game is either the game master or the players. They should keep track of any significant action by the player. And this can be done through a simple plus minus tally on a piece of scratch paper or something of that nature. Then at the end of the particular session or campaign, the game master should have the players check and adjust their mod. And simply, if their actions favored order, they would roll percentile dice. And if the roll exceeds their current alignment score, they'd be granted an increase of 1d3. And conversely, if their actions favored chaos, they would roll percentile dice. And if the roll is less than or equal to their current score, they would subtract 1d3. And again, there's a chart in the game of possible actions or concepts and ideals that players of different alignment levels might hold, like whether or not you worship the gods, or whether you tell the truth, or whether you are likely to steal or murder, those kinds of things. Again, even a character of very low alignment, someone who favors chaos, for example, even they can have a very rigid set of principles, lines that they will not cross, which most people would tend to think of as being associated with someone of higher alignment. But again, it's these are just ideas for players to use to come up with motivations for their characters of doing different things. Kismet is a system. It's basically a way for players to have their characters cheat death or avoid serious life-altering injuries. Again, going back to the hit point example, if a character takes more than 5 below their hit point level, 5 below 0, they're subject to what's called a severe injury table, which could result in loss of attribute numbers or loss of knowledge, skills, those sorts of things. And Kismet gives players the ability to either ignore death, cheat death, or ignore these potential negative consequences of having been killed. And it's kind of a pretty simple way to figure out your initial points. You roll a die to get an odd or even number, so like a die 6. And you're either going to get an even or an odd result. And you match the number of prime attributes you have that are the same as that die roll, whether it's odd or whether it's even. And you're going to have either from 0 to 5 matching that odd or even value. And then based on the little chart that I have there, that tells you how many points you get. And those points are set for the duration of character. Now, it is possible to have Kismet points awarded to you, but you would have to do something so extraordinary that the gods would grant you this, so to speak. But like I said, they're used with the character faces death. You can spend a point and you don't die, or you can spend a point and not have to roll on the severe injury recovery side effects table. Or you can also use your points to help save another character within your party. And to do this, however, at least two players need to agree to donate a point. In which case, if two players agree, then that character avoids death or avoids these serious side effects. And the last of our secondary attributes are what I call renown. And renown is basically a measure of how well the party is known throughout the land. And it's not an individual score. It's based on the deeds of the party. And again, it's not really a measure of how good or bad the party is, because you could be infamous or you could be famous. It can be used by the game master to affect encounters, job offers, bartering to a certain extent. If you get a really high renown, you might even be known by the Pharaoh himself, in which case you might be called upon to do or perform a particular heroic deed. It's all up to the game master. And to determine the initial party renown, everybody rolls 1d10, and based on your cast, you have a chance of obtaining 1 point. And then anyone who has an attribute of 15 or higher, you get a +1 point for each of these attributes. Again, going back to the beginning of determining attributes, everybody's going to have at least one of these, because you don't want to have characters that are below 15 in at least one attribute. And there's also possibility, based on the background of the characters, of getting some additional points as well. And then the sum of all of this is the party's renown value. Now, as you go adventuring, generally the game master should assign a certain level of renown to a particular task or scenario. And if you're totally successful, you'd get maybe 3 points. If you're partially successful, maybe 1 point or 2 points. And that brings up another issue, which is even attempting something can give you a renown, even though it might be some really daunting task that no one really expects you to be able to achieve. But just by the fact that you tried can give you your party renown. Now, renown can change a little bit based on whether, say, NPCs join the party or characters leave the party. And it's generally 1 to 3 points. Again, that's detailed in the rules, how you might lose renown or gain renown as the party changes over time, beyond the actual deeds of the party. So that's it for the secondary attributes. Once again, if you're interested in obtaining a copy, or you know someone who might be interested in checking out the game, go to CallingCrowDesigns.com. The store is online. And anybody who orders a copy also receives a free PDF copy as well. Thank you very much.